All right, the Bucks. It is Talking Buccaneers with me, Fumane, on the Monday after the Saturday when Orlando Pirates have drawn 1-1 against Mamelodi Sundowns in the MTN 8 semi-final first leg. Now, before I get into the video, something that I do want to kind of say ahead of time, just for weeks coming and maybe even months coming, is that at the present moment, it is a bit tricky for me sometimes to take out an immediate match reaction. So I will be figuring it out as I go until I find some sort of system that helps. This particular weekend, I couldn't do an immediate reaction because I had a funeral very close to me, so I couldn't record. I couldn't even go to the stadium. I had to watch the match back and think about it. But every now and again, especially during the week, it is quite tricky for me to find time to record. But nonetheless, I will find some time somewhere to either record ahead of time or record maybe a day after, 2 days after, that sort of thing. This week, I thought, let me come with a Monday 30 minutes, maybe extended period. For those of you that maybe are still thinking about the game, maybe even kind of looking forward to what we might expect, that sort of thing. I thought, hey, it's Monday. Long day of work for some of you, most of you. For those that don't work, we'll be praying for that. But yeah, let's be thinking still about what we saw this weekend. And yeah, so this is the reason that I'm here. And I think that's kind of the admin out the way. I do want to get into, I will be putting out another video tomorrow, which is going to be the build-up to the Stellenbosch game. But I thought there's so much that I had on my mind after the game against Mamelodi Sundowns that I thought I don't want to combine the videos, because I thought maybe if I do one sitting and kind of speak about the Stellenbosch and the Mamelodi Sundowns, so look back and look forward. But I thought it might end up being a 2-hour show. So maybe let me kind of still speak about the Mamelodi Sundowns, and that will inform my preview for the Stellenbosch game, which, fingers crossed, is going to be out tomorrow, as per planning currently. But anyway, so I think there's a lot that we saw on the weekend in the game against Mamelodi Sundowns that specifically I want to get into. I did a video before the game started, and in watching the video back, because that's something that I do. So I do a video and then I watch it back and I go, did I say everything that I thought? That kind of thing. So everyone who does content, I assume you have some kind of procedure to critique your own videos and that sort of thing. In my critique, something that I picked up was I did spend, a lengthy amount of time in that video speaking about Abdulsam Wadu, speaking about the uncertainty concerning him, the uncertainty of his spell at the club, and what looks like is boiling water for him, and what to me anyway looks like his days at the club being numbered. Now, the numbered might still mean there's 3 months left, but you almost feel like it is a ticking time bomb. You feel like it's going to be a when instead of an if he will leave the club. It almost feels like it's just headed towards there because it's so negative right at the very start. I know people talk about there was a lot of question marks around Jose Rivero as well, but I think in the way of negativity, if there was some way to quantify how negative are the fans towards Abdulsam Wadu compared to any other coach in recent history that was at Orlando Pirates or came to Orlando Pirates, I think for Wadu, with how much, there's so much interest around Pirates at this present moment compared to Jose Rivero, especially if you could quantify how much interest and how much people are talking about Pirates compared to when Jose Rivero was signed at the club, and now that Wadu is at the club. I think there's much more interest, or there at least is much more dialogue around this head coach than there was around Jose Rivero. And for that reason, the negativity is so much. Like everywhere you go, there's so much negativity. Whichever social media you go onto, or social media you go onto, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, somewhere you will find someone saying something about Abdesam Wadu at some time in the day. And for that reason, it kind of feels like there's just too much damage limitation that needs to happen. And you imagine that if results keep going in the vein that they have, in the vein of form that they have been going in the last sort of 3 games, he's going to get the sacking. He just will. If anything, the club will just want to. I mean, listen, I do think the club is very professional and they want to be firm on their convictions in terms of this is the coach that we brought and we want to back him and we believe in him. But I think if Pirates gone to, in the span of the next 2 months, lose another 3 or so games, I think there will be conversation around Abdeslam Wadu. Certainly in the league, if he doesn't pick up with consecutive wins, if there's a defeat here and another defeat somewhere within the next 2 months, I really suspect that he might get the sacking. But that's just my feeling. It's my feeling based on my observation around the club, based on nothing else. So this is not expert opinion or whatever. It's just a guy who's watching things that are happening in the club and talks about them, And yeah, so the previous video, like I said, turned into this whole rant of myself talking about I suppose mine and other people's loss of belief or reduced belief in Abdesam Wadu taking the club forward. And forward at this point means winning the league or winning trophies and that sort of thing. Definitely out succeeding Jose Rivero would be a step forward at this point in time. Stagnation means it's failed objectives by Abdesam Wadu because by his own admission, the club is at a point and he's here to take it to the next step by his own admission. And so the next step is definitely winning the league, or at least a 3 points gap at the end of it. And, to start with 6 points dropped out of 6 has put him in hot water, and I spent a long chunk of my previous video speaking about that. But obviously, any video going forward, especially on the game after the previous one when we lost against Marumo Gallants, the magnifying glass was going to be on Abdesam Wadu, and that exactly was the case when I saw the starting lineup against Mamelodi Sundowns. First of all, my reaction to that is Dino van Rooyen, Talent Mbata in the starting 11, as well as Evidence Mahopa, who have not gotten any minutes out on the pitch ever since the season started. And, already for someone like myself, I go, wouldn't you want to play with players that have match fitness going into this game? This is arguably the biggest game you play in the course of a season, and you want to play it with 3 unfit players, 1 up front, 1 in the back line, 1 in the center of midfield. So everywhere on the pitch there's an unfit player, pretty much, and that was my reaction. I thought my reaction was a fair one because after 60 minutes, he had to substitute out at least 2 of the 3 of those, which was Talent Mbata, I think, got cramps. Dino van Rooyen was also substituted out. If I'm not mistaken, he had cramps as well. And Evidence Mahopa at some point was also substituted out for Witumelo Radiopane. Now, whether or not they performed well is something I'm going to get into in the course of this video at some point. But that was my reaction. Obviously, we saw Siema still playing at centre back, and if he was going to risk playing someone like Mbata, I want to risk playing someone like Van Rooyen at right back, despite the fact that they were not match fit. For me, at least in my head, I went, why don't we see Nda then? Especially when I kind of want to justify myself. I go, we have defensive frailties, especially with marking in the box. And wouldn't you then throw on coach? Because you've also spoken about how you played Mashilwani at right back for his height. Wouldn't you then bring on, Olisa Nda? But to be fair, to argue against my own point, I think he would have thought this is Mamelodi Sundowns. They don't have a track record for their set piece danger or posing a threat in the way of set pieces and balls floated in the box, at least. So I think he thought, you know what, which is something, again, I'll get into. He just wanted a ball-playing centre-back because of the approach that we would have adopted going into that game. And so he went with Siyama and Bogazi in the absence of Sibisi and the rest of the centre-backs that are not around. And yeah, I think that is sort of generally my reaction when, the lineup came out. I think the other thing would have been the midfield looked like it was a workman-like midfield with Talent Mbata and Sihle Nduli, which for me, I already thought similar kind of player, but I guess some people disagree with that sort of thing. And then, Sibilibili at right wing for me looked like he wanted to have some kind of protection for Dino van Rooyen. Should Mamelodi Sundowns double team, the right back and that sort of thing. I thought, he's wanting that kind of protection where that Sibilibili can drop and kind of give you like numbers at the back. That was my initial reaction. I beg your pardon. My initial reaction of seeing Sibilibili at right winger. And then Evidence Makgopa, I kind of knew that, in a game such as Sundowns where my prediction was always that we're going to kind of want to stretch their defense. That's what we want to do. We want to stretch their defense, both horizontally and vertically. So who else than Makgopa to do that shift for you? I suppose some would say Mbutuma, but Makgopa with the record, with evidence, as it were, no pun intended, in previous matches, he's able to do that sort of thing, And so that was kind of my reaction. Looking at the Mamelodi Sundowns side, no surprises in the way of kind of back four. I know they played Dunyelwa at right back. The sensible thing to do to just play an orthodox right back at right back and to play an orthodox left back, arguably, in Aubrey Mudiba at left back, and then Keanu Cupido at centre back alongside Grant Kekana. And then in the midfield, when the teams came out, they're Temba Zwane sort of as the offensive central midfielder or central attacking midfielder. And then they had a base in midfield of Tebogo Mokoena and Marcelo Allende. And then the front three was Arthur Sales, Ikram Reynas, and Tashik Matthews. So not much in the way of surprising as well, for Mamelodi Sundowns. They look like you thought they would look like. And yeah, that's kind of how both teams lined up. And again, I just want to emphasize the point that nothing much was surprising in the way of lineups. Well, especially in the side of Mamelodi Sundowns. I'm actually there was surprising in the way of Orlando Pirates in the lineup. But in terms of Mamelodi Sundowns, they look like what you thought they would look like in this game. Now, I do want to kind of speak about certain individuals in that game, but before I get to that, I think essentially the game went in the way that you expected it to. I do want to give Abdesam Wadu some credit, and the credit that I want to give Abdesam Wadu is that he went with the approach that he obviously should have went with. I think every analyst, for people who call themselves analysts, every pundit, everyone who's kind of thinking about the game and who's just observing and making logical and fair observations would have thought that, the chance that Orlando Pirates have against Mamelodi Sundowns is by running at them. So by creating spaces, to run into is the only chance that Pirates has against Mamelodi Sundowns, because obviously Mamelodi Sundowns possess a very positional, possession-based style of play. What does that mean is that, you know, their play is based on getting advantages by knowing where to be on the pitch and getting certain players in certain positions in order to dominate the game. But on top of that is that they retain the possession because they've got technically very good players who can keep the ball. So in other words, the players will be in certain zones, and the way that they position themselves is a way to gain advantage, because they will have obviously advantages by the way of, you know, outnumbering the opposition in certain zones of the pitch, but also occupying dangerous zones on the pitch where a player, if he receives the ball in that zone, he will stretch the opposition or that sort of thing. And then on top of that, they will try and outnumber you in certain spaces. But on top of that is that, you know, they've got very technically good players in order to keep possession as well. And so the gameplay is very possession based. They possess the ball because they've got the players to do that. And so, you know, as soon as the lineup of Mamelodi Sundowns comes out, that's what you expect, looking at who is on the pitch. Marcelo Allende, mastermind in that kind of thing, sort of traveling around the midfield, looking for spaces to receive the ball and pass it. Tebogo Mokoena, another one who's very good at that. Sometimes will drop into in between the centre backs in order to be able to progress the play. And Themba Zwane. Okay, so actually I want to start here is that what that Mamelodi Sundowns way of playing is very reliant on. It is reliant on exactly what I described, in that they're very good at keeping possession of the ball and possessing positions where they can hurt you. And so as they travel from one zone to the next with the ball, they're relying on the fact that, you know, they are able to progress the play because of how good their system tactically is and how good their players are. And so when you look at that lineup, you already know they don't have pace. And so for them to progress until they score a goal is very much reliant on the fact that they will keep possession of the ball and they will kind of break you down. And they're very good at it. You know, the midfield is very good at keeping the ball, and they will progress through your lines. You know, and so that's kind of what is what Sundowns looks like as soon as their lineup comes out. That's the assumption we're all making. They will play like that. And credit again to Abdeslam Wadu for the fact that he was very brave in identifying the fact that, you know, Mamelodi Sundowns don't have a lot of pace, right? They don't have a lot of pace, and so you wanna then take that risk to try and win the ball back, like actually press them high up, because you don't want them to have ease in terms of kind of progressing the play to where they've got you pinned in your own box and they try to break you down there. Because once they've sort of progressed the ball to that third, the final third, they are very good. They will be able to create a chance. But Pirates is sort of thinking, and Abdeslam Wadu is saying, let's press them so that they fail to progress the play. Because if they try to go above us, they will not have the pace to chase. So we can take that risk of, you know, going high up. And, you know, I saw something which was particularly impressive in that at some point you saw, because Mamelodi Sundowns, again, they will build up with a lot of players. Tebogo Mokoena will drop in there, Marcelo Allende will be in there, and then they've got, you know, Oprimudiba, and then they've got Zuko Mdunyelo, the two centre backs and the goalkeeper, because they're trying to play out of you know, that first phase, or rather that first pressure that Pirates brings. And they're trying to play past that. And Pirates are so brave, because at some point you saw Sibilibili going, you saw Lebogile Mfukeng there, Talent Mbata was joining Tito Maswanganye to be the two players behind the striker, Evidence Makgopa, who was the one chasing, and kind of, I suppose, triggering the press, you know. And as soon as they kind of played, and then you had these four players following to try and stop the ball, and then Sihle Nduli would kind of remain in midfield. And I thought it was brave from Pirates because they knew that Sundowns can't necessarily go long. So we'll try and kind of hurry them and press them in their third, and take that risk that if they do play long, we can easily deal with the pace of Ikram Reyners and Tashreeq Matthews, who are the only two players who bring some kind of pace. Arthur Salles is more of an intricate player who likes to play in pockets and is dangerous in that sort of thing. But Themba Zwane as well is another one who he's not going to offer you pace, so he's reliant on you kind of getting the ball to him. He'll hold it up and then he will combine with other players. And if he does that, then they will score in that regard. And I thought it was so unfortunate for Mamelodi Sundowns in that regard, in that they lost Themba Zwane. Losing Themba Zwane, I think, took away very much from their approach, because the player that was going to kind of hold up the ball for them, especially when they find players in advanced positions, is Themba Zwane. And then Themba Zwane was going to get Salles, Matthews and Reyners into the game, and then would kind of see the intricate passing. But they lost Zwane. They replaced him with Jaden Adams, and I thought Jaden Adams in that regard went missing. He completely went missing because Jaden Adams does what typically Marcelo Allende does, is that he's sort of in deeper positions trying to progress the play. He's not up there kind of trying to create chances. So they lost a lot in that sense. But I think Pirates, to kind of shift over to Orlando Pirates, is that for us, it was sort of a simple approach, in that what we did do is we tried to build up from the back, and we very well knew that we're not going to play through the pressure of Mamelodi Sundowns. So the game plan was clear. It was simple. We're just going to go above them. So anything that we try to put together in the way of passing is to isolate chunks of spaces that Sibilibili is going to run at on the right, or Dion Hotto is going to run at on the left. And so the way that Pirates kind of set up was Sipho Shane, the goalkeeper, and then the two center backs in build up. And then you kind of had Sibilibili, well, the right winger at that point, who was right winger, being high and wide on the right. And then Dion Hotto was the one who was going to provide that width and the legs on the left. And then Mufokeng and Maswanganyi were kind of sort of coming in centrally to create those spaces. So they were coming infield to drag people on them, to isolate chunks of space for on runners. And that's typically or the gist of kind of how Pirates was trying to set up in order to take advantage of Mamelodi Sundowns. And then you've got someone like Mahopa as the striker, who would vacate kind of centrally and come in between the left back and the centre back, so as to attract the attention of the left back, so that Sibilibili has then got the space for a diagonal switch to stretch, Mamelodi Sundowns kind of horizontally, or to come sort of towards the ball and then create the space behind the defenders. And Mamelodi Sundowns were thinking to themselves, hey, let's just play offside trap, because we can't deal with the pace. So for Pirates, it just created scenarios in which you just saw them trying to go, being caught offside, finding the space behind. Hotto on the left with a large distance to travel, so for the most part wasn't so much of a danger. But Sibilibili, with being the right winger and with not so much distance as compared to Hotto to travel in order to run into those spaces, was the one who was the consistent threat throughout the game. And yeah, that was kind of the vein of the game. And I think, it then leaned towards Orlando Pirates, mostly because Sundowns lost their main threat, which was intricate passing, especially in the final third. I think they didn't have a glue, someone who pieced things together in the final third. It was almost like two isolated teams, where you had the three up front and then you had the rest of the team kind of in build up, but you missed that person who was going to then launch their attacks. And their attacks we're going to now find these clever positions to start combining and carve you apart and create these chances. And yeah, so they kind of went, muted for the rest of the first half and large periods of the second. But for Pirates, it was kind of playing in the favor because Sundowns, as soon as they step up and they try to press Pirates, the long ball was the resort. And you had a willing runner in Sibilibili again and another willing runner in Dion Hoto. And it kind of went in that vein. Obviously, Mamelodi Sundowns score in a set-piece situation, which again is a problem and a pain point for Orlando Pirates. Again, failing to kind of identify the fact that, maybe let me not say it in that way, is that, possessing that zonal marking system where you allow the opposition to kind of run onto the ball and head it. And people are kind of just standing in their zones. You have mismatches in terms of who's marking who. So some players are man marking, but it's like a combined man marking and zonal marking systems where you've got these players that actually just stay and wait for the ball to come in, and runners are just running into the box. And yeah, we saw the battle of Dino van Rooyen and Tebogo Mokoena. And Mokoena is a bit slightly, maybe if I'm not mistaken, he is slightly taller than Dino van Rooyen, but Tebogo Mokoena has also got a lot of meat about him, and he is very strong. And yeah, he won that battle against Dino van Rooyen when it mattered most, and Mamelodi Sundowns got their goal in that way. Sort of off script, considering the opposition. You didn't expect that they were going to score via a set piece, but I suppose it was good for them that they did, because they didn't get much in the way of how they actually wanted to win that game, which was, you thought that they were coming to open us up and score. And for Pirates, it took until late in sort of the dying embers of the game to finally get something on the score sheet in the threat that we were posing for Sundowns, is that, we had a lot of space for Sibilibili to run onto, and other players at various times, but mainly Sibilibili being the main goal threat, because Pirates were just isolating that right space, and Sibilibili was such a willing runner towards, until the very end of the game, and that's how Pirates get their goal. And I do want to say this. I thought something that was particularly concerning, which got solved when Sipho finally came on, is that Talent Mbata and Sihle Nduli ran onto the same spaces. And so you had a situation where, you see Sihle Nduli trying to go and receive the ball in that space, but Talent Mbata is going there. And now you've got these two players in the same zone, meaning that, there's another space where, or actually you're making it easier for Mamelodi Sundowns to mark you. So it's very easy for Sundowns to mark you, and it's harder for you to keep possession because you've got players in the same position. I think that's how I'll simply put my concern with having Talent Mbata and Sihle Nduli, is because I saw them for the most part trying to run to the same spaces. The other thing is, you saw Tito doing what Tito does, is that he was leaving that space. He was leaving kind of that space between the defensive line of Mamelodi Sundowns and the midfield line, and he was actually coming on to where Mbata and Nduli were in sort of like similar positioning in order to, I guess, attract Mamelodi Sundowns and then play the ball. But a thought that I had is that if that was kind of the approach where he was given the instructions to say drop deep so that we can attract markers and then play the ball above them or behind them, I kept thinking in the game that Kabelo Dlamini would have been the better alternative in that regard because of his accurate passing, and yeah, so Tito was largely ineffective in the regard of the fact that, yes, Tito will drag people all around, and maybe to give him credit, that's what he does, is that he attracts people and he opens spaces for other people. That's what Patrick Maswanganyi does. But obviously then you want, because you are doing that so that you can open the space and play a pass, then you want someone who can then play the pass. And I think in this particular game, it looked like, Kabelo Dlamini, for me, would have been the better alternative. And the other thing, again, about Tito is that he's quite bookable. So it's something that I see is starting to get a bit problematic and worrying for me, is that he's quite bookable, and you wonder when he's going to get that red card finally, or where he's going to miss a match. And I know for some Buccaneers, it's like, that would be great for Tito to miss a match. But yeah, I thought, he travels a lot, he drags people around, and maybe in the way of passing, finding that pass towards the flanks, Kabelo Dlamini would do that better. But also, Tito's bookable, and you don't want to lose a man against Mamelodi Sundowns, because then they start to outnumber you, and they'll easily pass around you. Again, I want to give credit to Abdeslam Wadu for this again, which is that, in theory, the way that he lined up with CM at centre back, thinking that he's a ball-playing midfielder, in theory, it makes sense considering the plan. The plan, which was the centre backs are going to be playing the passes. So in theory, I think, Siema, because knowing that Sundowns are not really going to pose threat in the air, and so you want someone who's going to be comfortable at the back, because we will have the most possession for us at the back. And so you want someone who's comfortable at the back and be able to play the passes. Now, this is not saying that I think CM is a great passer. It is to say that, in theory, the approach is a sensible one in playing him there. However, yeah, I still need some time actually to watch CM. I think there's something about him. But obviously, to be a top centre-back at Orlando Pirates, you don't just have to be, good enough in your ball-playing abilities. There's a lot more like attitude and, big game temperament, especially in these kind of games against Mamelodi Sundowns, but also consistency and these days, I think we also need someone who's going to be able to command in the box, so that might be the downfall, but also just kind of the ball playing abilities. I know like there's all this talk about, yeah, he's good enough, but because Pirates now want to play a lot of these long balls, you need someone who's going to like actually provide accurate passing. Easy that I still need to see. I can be honest about that. So in a nutshell, I'm kind of saying that, again, like I said, in theory, I think Siema, with what I suspect he's being brought on for, he makes sense. But I actually do want to give myself time to kind of watch him. I think he was decent in this game. He wasn't bad. He was decent against Mamelodi Sundowns. I think him and Mbogazi fantastic again, kind of pocketing people, and his duels, that he's going to win those all the time. Like 9.999 times out of 10, he's going to win it. And so solid display. Obviously, he does play the assist for Sibilibili's goal right at the end. Who Sibilibili from right back. Moremi has kind of dragged Marcus to open again that space for Sibilibili to run onto, and he slotted in for Pirates to equalize. The other person I think that I might have wanted to kind of touch on was, let me think. If I don't come up with someone, it would be a great place to end the show, because I don't want to stay here for too long. I think 30 minutes is a decent enough time. But yeah, I did actually want to say something about Evidence Makgopa, to say Evidence Makgopa, I think in these games doesn't receive the credit that like he actually deserves. I think his feet were quite beautiful in the box. I think his hold-up play is actually quite fantastic. I have said this before about him, but he goes on to always prove this. And some people will obviously criticize him in the fact that he's not I think he's the most exciting player, even though he's actually got some nice touches at some time, Evidence Makgopa, but he's also not like a clinical finisher. And he's like a journeyman, like he travels a lot on the pitch. But all of that, I think, he's actually a fantastic player, Evidence Makgopa. It's just that you don't like him a lot of the time, because he's not the, I don't know what it is about him, but he's not the most exciting player. But I think he puts in a shift and he does a great job for Orlando Pirates. So I want to end it there. I've said a lot of things, but I thought I'd sit for a good 30 minutes and kind of reflect on that game and hear what you guys think. Tomorrow I will be doing a preview to the Stellenbosch game. I will not do the preview in this game because there will be so much then to talk about. But otherwise, let me leave it here. Up the mighty Bucks. Cheers. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video from Talking Buccaneers. If you did, please hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with all our future content.